we're officially starting our webinar of Eduwizard. So Eduwizard is an educational tool which we are going to demonstrate briefly, and I'm here with a couple of participants, and I'm also with my co-host here, Hans Mulder, who is also one of the founders of the Meeting Wizard and Eduwizard. Eduwizard basically is the label, the brand label of Meeting Wizard, but purely focusing on the educational market, because mainly the Eduwizard technology is being used in classrooms worldwide. So we're going to address a couple of topics today. First of all, we're going to do a small introduction about what is Eduwizard. Then we're going to talk about the biggest benefits of a group decision support system used in the class. And then we're going to highlight a couple of use cases that you can use in the class. And then we're going to do a small demonstration of the technology where also the participants will log in and will show how you can actually deal with it in the classroom. So first of all, and Hans, feel free to fill me at some point with some topics. We're going to briefly discuss what is a group support system and why is it interesting for educational environments. So group support systems already, they are now for 25 years. We also have written a book about it, about the use of group support systems in education. And it's mainly focusing on engaging in a group in collaborating with each other towards a specific outcome, a specific goal. So in the case of a classroom, you can, for example, imagine that in the class, you want to collaborate on a specific topic, you want to have a discussion, you want to have the discussion free-flowing, and at then some point you want to make the decision towards, for example, what do we find, what is our opinion in the classroom, what do we find important as students in the classroom, and at some point perhaps make a decision on what are next steps, for example, new learning materials or new papers that need to be written. So eventually you direct the class towards a specific outcome. And so Eduwizard helps you by structuring the classroom, but it also helps you by keeping the students engaged. Mainly because we also see more and more mobile phones into the classroom, and we are of the opinion that you rather have full engagement with the student by allowing them to use their mobile phones rather than banning the mobile phone. So it's now being used already all over the world, Eduwizard, Gulu University, Makerere University, Police Academy, Curaçao Police Department, the High School of Utrecht, ROC Mondrian, High School of Rotterdam, Antwerp Management School. So a lot of universities and schools already using Eduwizard in practice. Over the last couple of years, we've developed the application more and more towards a mobile application, so everybody in the classroom can participate, regardless if they are in the class physically or they're outside of the classroom, for example, at home or in another location. And we also saw through the Corona pandemic that more and more students want to work remotely and also want to work on a place where they prefer to work or do follow the classrooms. So it allows you to also use Eduwizard in combination with, for example, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, WebEx, RingCentral. So we have numerous use cases over the last couple of years where you can actually use Eduwizard in combination with platforms like we are now doing today with Zoom. So a couple of use cases that we've seen in the past by making use of Eduwizard. So one of the most important one is doing research with the Eduwizard technology. So in case of, for example, behavioral sciences, social sciences, management sciences, it sometimes helps to examine a specific topic with an expert group or a specific group to gather insights, opinions or insights. So Eduwizard helps you to collect viewpoints from a group, and you'll see that later on in the demonstration that we're going to do. You collect these insights, and then you categorize those insights, and then you can, for example, validate or vote or verify the specific outcomes of those research data that you've captured by making use of the Eduwizard technology. So that's one. And so that's being used in master research as well as in PhD research. Another use case that we also see is that, for example, in the same group, you can discuss sensitive topics. And so because it allows you to use it in an anonymous way. And so you can ask the participants to either log in with their name or in an anonymous way. And this way it helps you to discuss, for example, very sensitive topics. The good thing is that during the research, you can also capture all the data, obviously, but also at the end generate immediately the report. So the research report, and you can bring that back to the participants. That allows the participants to have a better feeling about their commitment and their engagement throughout the session. And so they are feeling more engaged. That's one use case that we've used in the past. Another one, which we are now also see rising, is that the universities and the higher educations are more and more relying on subsidies from, for example, local government. So they want to participate with their sponsors in what kind of topic do we want to research and what kind of problem do we want to solve here. So Eduwizard allows you to combine a group of stakeholders, for example, the sponsor or stakeholders that benefit from a specific problem, but also the staff of the educational institute. And so you can collaborate on what topic is relevant for us to research. How do we want to research this? What is the objective in terms of the outcome and what do we want to achieve with, in this case, the research? But also, what are specific milestones that we want to achieve in order to get this sponsorship? And so Eduwizard allows you to structure that, make decisions on it, and set actions towards a specific research goal. And so that's another use case that we also see quite often. And another one, obviously, is in the classroom. And so we talked about research, we talked about subsidized research with multiple stakeholders. And the last one, and of course, we have more, but these are the three most important ones. The last one is actually in the classroom. And we are, also as teachers in the classroom, a big fan of using Eduwizard in what we call flip the classroom. And so actually engage all your students by making use of the mobile phone. And you want to engage them by very interesting topics. So for example, you prepare Eduwizard at the beginning of your class, let's say 1 or 2 days before you start your class. You pick a specific topic that you want to discuss. For example, what we want to do later on is talk about the adoption of technology in the classroom. What do the students think about it? You can add an article in the Eduwizard technology, which they can pre-read before the class. And in the class, you can immediately start the discussion. Okay, what do we allow in the classroom in terms of technology? What do we find useful? What do we find fancy to use? And so you can have a discussion of that. During the class, you then deepen the discussion by, for example, voting, where you actually can discuss viewpoints of specific students towards a specific topic. And so it's interesting to look at where do we find consensus in the group. It's also interesting to see where do students deviate in their opinion and have the discussion on that. And that's the way how, to our opinion, teaching nowadays occurs. And so you want to express opinions or viewpoints towards each other, discuss it, and with that new knowledge, you allow the students to further improve their own capabilities. And at the end of the class, you basically have the full documentation of the class. So the entire class that you just given, full documentation. And by providing them with the report, again, the students feel very engaged because they all were part of the discussion and, of course, the voting and the end, the next steps. And so it allows you to do that in a very collective way. So let's see it. Let's see how it works. So I'm now going to share my screen and briefly go over some functions in the Eduwizard application. As I mentioned, Eduwizard is part of Meeting Wizard. It's a brand label, but specifically assigned towards educational markets. So this is the interface of what the Meeting Wizard, in this case, the Eduwizard application, can do. Very simple. So every student, every teacher, every staff member of a university or educational institute can use it. So what you see here is the agenda overview. So here I'm going to generate an agenda. I'll do that later on. So, but first explain a little bit, what can you find more? So for example, here you have the library function, and in the library function, there are predefined agendas also for schools and educational institutes. Here you see the users of the application, And here you see, for example, the settings of the application, which you can change towards your own educational institute logo and coloring. I also have an overview of my licensing, so I can exactly see how much session did I consume and how much did I use. And I have a full overview of the full uses of all my sessions that I did in the past. So we'll start with setting up an agenda. So as discussed, we are going to focus on the use of technology in the classroom. The use of technology in the classroom. So what I'm doing now is setting up a session as a preparation for my class. And so I can do this prior to the class, let's say 1-2 days or a week before the session starts. And I'm going to briefly discuss what you need to do as a teacher to set this up, or as a staff member to set up the technology. So we're going to discuss with my participants here, Menno, Nicole, Hans, and I think we also have some others that are not visible, but we can see that because they are also online. We are going to collect their viewpoints on the use of technology in the classroom. So that's the title of the session. I'm creating it. The main language here is English, and I can also delete the data set for a specific date. So I'll leave it at 1 year, and I'm going to share the report afterwards. So in this case, I have two groups. I have teachers and I have students, which I want to have engaged in this class. So I set the initial agenda. First step now is I'm creating a manual step. And in this manual step, I'm going to define my introduction. And so as a teacher, I'm going to do an introduction about the topic. So I'm going to tell a little bit about what we want to achieve today in the class. I'm also going to talk about what are the outcomes. So I want to discuss the objectives, outcomes, and perhaps learnings. So this is, I can fill this completely with texts. And so the end report also has a structured way of everything that you want to do. But for this demo, I'm going to keep it very brief. And I can add here, for example, a URL, for example, to an article that they can pre-read about the use of technology in the classroom. Or perhaps banning the mobile phone in the classroom, which we are not in favor of, but I think it's a very triggering article to put there for students to read. Today, we're not going to do that. So I generated an introduction. So this is a manual step. The next step that we're going to do is I want to discuss in terms of a brainstorm. So I want to have the students brainstorm about the use of technology in the classroom. So I'm going to ask, which major technology developments do you observe in the classroom? Then the topic here is to brainstorm on technology. I allow the participants for this demo to put a maximum of 2. And I have a couple of options here, which are explained in other tutorials that we have on the channel, on the YouTube channel. So I'm not going to highlight everything. And I'm going to give a small instruction, and that I want to have the students, in this case the participant, to describe it in a precise manner, so we understand what you mean. So for example, if you use the word, an abbreviation that nobody knows, it doesn't help in the discussion. So I want the students to formulate precise, and so everybody understands it. This is, by the way, something that as a moderator or as a teacher, you learn over time to encourage the free-flowing process. So this is my first step. Then the second step is I'm going to order this, categorize, undouble perhaps. I'm going to look at, do I see specific additional items, or do I want to discuss in the classroom new viewpoints? We'll show that later on in the demo. And there's the warning. That's always good. The file editor field is required, of course. And why do we do that? Because we want in this step, and this is basically a blackboard, you want to have the input from your previous step. So in this case, the brainstorm. So you generate ideas, it's automatically put to the board. And this is where you're going to order these items. So we have the ordering step, and then we're going to vote. And in the voting step, we are going to ask the participants to rank the most important ones from 1 to 3. So I choose here ranking. I have multiple options, but now I'm going to rank. And I'm going to ask the participants. I can also, by the way, here add the anonymous step. We're not going to do that. And I'm going to ask them, please comment your rank. So if you want to add comments, you'll see that later on, how that works. But in this case, this is very interesting, for example, by doing research that you have, you allow the participants, by the way, to add an additional viewpoint or a specific insight to their voting. And so you allow them, you allow yourself to capture additional information. So you saw here, again, a warning, the input voting items field is required. And so the input, again, I want to collect from the previous step. So in this case, the flipboard. So I've now have 3 nice steps in a sequential ordering, resulting in a specific step or in a specific outcome. So now I'm ready. I've generated a very simple class to demonstrate how Eduwizard works. I'm going to start the meeting. And this way I can allow the participants, in this case, the students, to log in. So I'll also log in myself. And then with an easy access via the mobile phone, students are able to log in. For the ones that did not scan the QR code, here is it again. You always have students that are late. I'm not mentioning names here, but you sometimes have students that are late. So it's very easy to display either the QR code or do a right-click button and then do copy link, and then you can copy the URL, and you could put that, for example, in the chat of your Zoom or your Teams. You can also make a copy of the QR code and put that in the chat. So there are multiple ways to provide access from the Eduwizard towards the students. Okay. So we're now in the meeting. And so I generated the meeting, and I see already that Jim is in, Adrian is in, Bob is in, Hans is in, Louise is in, and Mike. So I see all my participants here on the left. So I decided this is my class for today, and I'm going to close the classroom door. And so that's what I can do here. I'm clicking the register button, and you'll see that the code here disappears. And then I basically shut my virtual door. And that's basically to avoid what we call Zoom bombing, that people enter your meeting without prior notice. And so the classroom now door is shut. Okay, so we're going to start with the first step. The students obviously see now in their mobile phone this manual introduction. So as a teacher, I'm going to explain what's the purpose of the class today, what are the objectives, what do we perceive as an outcome, and what do we want to get as a learning outcome. So this is my introduction. Then I'm going towards the brainstorm. And so what I already mentioned is that I want to have the participant do the brainstorm on, in this case, what are the major technology developments that you see in the classroom? That's my question here. So I'm going to ask the participants to already put in their input, and I collect all those viewpoints from the entire class to see what good ideas they have in terms of use of technology in the classroom. Participants, by the way, can also see this, and you're also able to shut this down so they don't see each other's input. In this case, I left it open, so basically everybody can see their each other's input. So I see virtual reality, a real-time data in the classroom, ChatGPT, trivia, obviously, Eduwizard, of course. So I see already a couple of new technologies. In this case, you can limit the participants to provide their input to, in this case, I've set the limit to 2. Because if you have a big classroom and you limit it to 2, if you have a class, for example, of 30 and you limit it to 2, then you have 60 items. and that becomes more cumbersome to manage. Okay, very nice. So I see Google Forms, Brightspace, virtual reality, real-time data in the classroom. So this is a good first catch as for this test. I can also show these results on a big projector in the class, and so everybody can see it on a separate screen. So my next step will be to order these items and to categorize them, potentially undouble them. So let's see, we have real-time data in the classroom. Do we see double items? I don't think so. We don't see any things that are unclear. Everything is quite clear to understand. Of course, in the classroom, you have time. You want to have a free-flowing discussion. So you can ask students to, for example, defend their item that they just brought in, or discuss with each other why they submitted it. For example, if there is a deviation in opinion, or there's a semantic discussion about the wording. For now, we're not going to do that. So I'm taking actually now everything from my Flipboard, so everything that I've gathered in the brainstorm, and now I'm going to converge this towards a voting step. So I want the classroom to think of what is the most important one that you've seen in the last couple of years and developments. What's the most important one, and rank this from 1 to 3. So give it a number. So in this case, Adrian, Bob, Hans, Jim, and Louisa, please mention your voting here. The good thing is with Eduwizard, I can actually see here on the left, everything is black. So everybody here has a black coloring. If the browser of the participants become inactive, so basically the session with Eduwizard becomes inactive, it's being grayed out. So I can activate my student. Hey, Adrian, for example, or Bob, do you, in this case, participate in the class? So perhaps one of you now, participants, can close down the session or don't interact, so the viewer sees that it is inactive. I also can see here, you see the green check marks that Adrian submitted, Bob submitted, Jim. So I can also encourage, for example, in this case, Hans or Mike, to also submit their answer. This way, I have a full view of all the students actually participating in the group. And this allows also people with a less active voice in the class to actually participate. So I only see that Mike did not submit it yet. So I would like to encourage Mike to also submit. Dear Mike, can you do that? It actually feels like a real class, this. So very good, everybody submitted. So now I'm going to see the results. The good thing about Eduwizard is that you can actually demonstrate and give back to the class. So that's what we mean with flipping the classroom, giving back the results of the participants themselves. So basically, as a teacher, you're facilitating the discussion, in this case, the voting. So I see, yeah, obviously number one, Eduwizard, but let's zoom into, for example, virtual reality or real-time data in the classroom, ChatGPT. The interesting thing here, for example, is that ChatGPT has quite a big of variability. And so I see that, for example, Hans scores this very high, because ChatGPT potentially is a big influence in the classroom. And I see that Mike scores is quite low. This allows you to have Mike and Hans to have a discussion about their difference in opinions or difference in viewpoints. But it can also be that, for example, there's a difference in understanding. Or do we mean the same here? So this allows you to have this full discussion. I also see that we have a comment, which I already mentioned, that commenting really helps you, for example, in social science or behavioral science, to gather qualitative input. And I see that somebody here processes his topic. This ChatGPT will become very more and more important. Okay, so I think we have a good overview. I can also make a download to CSV, so later on I can parse that into nice visualization software. So we've closed the session, so the demo, and then I'm going to generate a report. I'm going to download it here as a PDF, and then immediately all participants receive the full report And therefore, this also contributes in the feeling that I actually participated in the session. I own my report. I collaborated in the session. I was engaged in the voting. I was engaged in the discussion. And that nowadays becomes more and more important with new generations of youth entering the classroom with their mobile phone. So Eduwizard allows you to really encourage this engagement. So finishing off, I also promised to show you this. So you see that Mike and Jim now become inactive. You see them gray, light gray. So this allows you to activate the student. That's what I promised at the beginning to show you as well. Okay, do you as a teacher, staff, or researcher want to use Eduwizard in your environment? Please feel free to request a trial license for 2 months, and hope to see you very soon in the near future in the classroom by making use of Eduwizard. Wish you all the best luck by using the technology. Thank you very much for your interest, and also the participants. Thank you for your input. Okay.